Welcome to Chez, Genèse, the place of new beginnings. My name is Catherine Hubert, and I founded and own a French-inspired cafe where, as a team, we are on a mission to change the way our world views and employs adults with disabilities. Our restaurant was born and is based in Greensboro, North Carolina, and that's where we practice and teach our mission and model. This is our channel where we dive in deep to who we are, what we do, and why we do it. Our hope is that this content is empowering to disabled and non-disabled humans alike, and that no matter what perspective you are coming from, whether that's employer, employee, parent, friend, or Chez Genèse fan, you feel welcomed, you learn something new, and you walk away with a deeper appreciation and understanding of humanity. Happy New Year, friends! Welcome to 2024. We are excited to be diving into the new year and kicking off our first YouTube of 2024 by talking about, is disability employment considered DEI work? This is something that I've given a lot of thought to over the past couple of years. I have not opposing thoughts or feelings about it, but definitely many thoughts and feelings about it, and we're going to dig into that today. So, starting kind of back it up just a little bit, what is DEI work? If you Google DEI definition, you'll see a myriad of hits that come up. A lot of them are colleges and universities. At least on kind of like the first page of Google, you'll see a lot of colleges and universities breaking down their definition of DEI. I went with like a straight up dictionary description in order to go with something that hopefully applies across the board or is universal, not specific to a particular university or organization. But the dictionary terms DEI as diversity, equity, and inclusion, a conceptual framework that promotes the fair treatment and full participation of all people, especially in the workplace, including populations who have historically been underrepresented or subject to discrimination because of their background, identity, disability, etc. DEI became a definition and something that was more widely talked about starting back in the civil rights movement of the 60s. It's something that has continued to exist since then, but had a resurgence in terms of nationwide push with the death of George Floyd in 2020. So it's something that you have probably heard used more in the past 3 to 4 years than maybe you had heard before that, and that's the reason. There was kind of a revitalization or focus towards diversity, equity, and inclusion work, especially in workplaces. There's, again, we're going to kind of get into, there's some mixed opinions and feelings about what that looks like, how it's executed, is it effective, is it being transformative, where is it helpful, where is it not, etc. We're going to talk about that a little bit today in regards to our sphere, which is disability employment, but that poses the question again of, is disability employment part of diversity, equity, and inclusion work? So how do we perceive DEI work and disability employment to fit together? Well, based on the definition that I read just a minute ago, they definitely do fit together. Disability employment for sure fits underneath the umbrella or within the definition of diversity, equity, and inclusion. But there have been studies done, and then just from a practical reality standpoint of what I'm observing, there are a lot of business owners that still don't believe or put together that disability falls underneath that umbrella. So, especially in the past few years, with a concentration on racial diversity within businesses and making sure that our businesses are built and made up of employees that are coming from diverse racial backgrounds, disability employment is still not super regarded, thought of. There's not a lot of initiatives or focus that are being put on employing people with disabilities. I'm stating that as truly just a simple fact. It's not something that's happening very regularly yet. There's so many areas of injustice and inequity that are still happening in the workplace that there's no, this is not me complaining that disability employment has not been a bigger focus. I think that my goal and hope, obviously, is that our workplaces become diverse in all regards as we move and grow into the future. And it makes a lot of sense to me why racial diversity has been such a focus in the past few years, especially. I'm not showing that disparity with any kind of judgment. That truly is just a fact. Disability employment is not something that businesses have really been focusing on, although it seems like things are starting to trend a little bit more in that direction. I hear more businesses or organizations starting to cue into the fact that that is a need and something to be thinking about. There's still not a lot of time or money or effort that's been being put in that direction. So, while we believe that businesses should be held accountable for their hiring practices and for their equitable treatment of their employees, we also are still seeing some pain points within the framework of DEI. So, what are those pain points? We're going to cover just two for the sake of time within this video. But the two biggest ones that I see are, number one, DEI I see as still often regarded by business owners or by organizations as a box to check or something to accomplish, which strips away the humanity of the subject matter that we're dealing with. When it becomes a task, like we need to have our pie charts need to look right, our graphs need to look right, our percentages need to look right. Like it all becomes very numbers based and not necessarily people based. I think that's a problem that businesses experience in a lot of different capacities. You can have a business that's very numbers based and forgets that you have real human beings that are doing that work for you, and that counts for a lot, and that matters, and that needs to be taken into consideration. So I hesitate a lot of times when people lump the work that we're doing into DEI work for that reason. I don't want what we're doing. I don't want any justice work, but this one personal to me, like I don't want what we're doing to be just a box for someone to check. I want people to be engaged truly with their minds, with their hearts, with their resources, for people to be willing to actually look inwards and examine their own bias, their own preconceived ideas, and to evaluate that and to be willing to make changes and make shifts. There's a difference, right, between treating something as an external issue or project, something to be fixed, something to solve, something to show or to demonstrate, and then something that's internal, that's more of a shift in terms of how you perceive other humans, which obviously impacts how we treat other humans. So that's the thing that I am really interested in focusing on is not what do statistics look like, how many people with disabilities does a business employ, what positions are they in, how long have they been there. Like those things do matter, but the thing that I'm really looking at is how are we talking about people with disabilities? What is your willingness look like in hiring people with disabilities? How do you treat your staff members? Are we giving the same opportunities to disabled employees and non-disabled employees? Are you viewing or thinking of a disabled employee as a burden on your business and a non-disabled human as someone who's an asset to your business? Like those are the things that I'm really interested in. And how do you perceive yourself as an employer who's employing people with disabilities? Do you see yourself as a benefactor, someone who's doing good, who's taking pity on? Or do you see your employees as benefiting and serving your business? They have purpose. It's a two-way street, right? Like as a business owner, you're providing something for your staff and they're providing something for you. You both are getting something out of the exchange. That's more of what I'm interested in, is really digging into the internal process and seeing mindsets shift, seeing perspectives change. That then translates into actions. Like that's where the movement and the change happens, is when we start to actually dig in deep into our own insides and be willing to make changes there first. And then those internal changes will encourage and spur on external changes. But if you're only making external ones, they don't last, they don't stick, and people can tell the difference. Humans are smart. And so if you're doing something just to feel like you're doing the right thing, or you're doing something so that you don't get called out or you don't get into trouble, there's a difference. Like that's not true inclusion, it's not true equity, it's not true justice. It's in many ways can still then be performative. So that was all the first pain point. The second one does tie in with that, and that is that I still oftentimes see a strong differentiation between non-disabled humans or employees and disabled humans and employees. Oftentimes still in our world, in businesses and organizations who are making a concentrated effort of hiring people with disabilities, this idea that there's a capacity differentiation, there's an imbalance, right? So there's a business owner who's good and noble in doing this kind or charitable thing by hiring someone with a disability, and in some ways the person with a disability owes gratitude or enthusiasm to the employer or to the world for the opportunity they've been given, which isn't equity. When you see a celebration around a disabled human getting a job, what that really is pointing to is just how far we still need to go in our work world, because it should be normalized. People with disabilities getting jobs should be part of our everyday fabric of employment life. Like that, if we're truly seeking disability employment equity and equal rights and opportunities for disabled humans, then it shouldn't be this big deal of, you're disabled and you got a job, that's amazing. Right now, the reason why a lot of times there's this, that's amazing, and this thing to celebrate is because there are so few job opportunities that are available to people with disabilities that it becomes this big deal when someone with a disability gets a job. I want to do away with that. Like, it should be exciting for any human who wants a job to get a job. It should not be this over and above extra celebration and excitement and appreciation for a job that a disabled person has been offered, because that just shows that we're not really providing the opportunities that we need to be. So where does that leave us moving forward? There are two things that I recommend for myself and for you, our viewers, our participants in our community here, our community members. That's probably a nicer way to say that. Number one is understanding and accepting that bias still exists, and then being willing to examine our own bias. This is not always an easy thing to do, so I encourage you to be kind towards yourself in that process. This is a non-judgmental way of looking inside and asking yourself some questions and being curious about the things that you are thinking and that you are believing about something. This is not an invitation for you to heap shame or judgment on yourself for thinking or believing a certain way. That is not usually helpful in terms of actually like accepting what's going on and then being willing to move and to grow for, like, move forward and grow. God, sorry. We were busy in the restaurant today and I was helping on the floor, and so I talked to more people than I normally do, and you can tell. So a check-in is something that's good to do regularly. I feel like I'm constantly trying to bump into my thoughts and feelings, my authentic ones, like the unfiltered, just like collide with the things that I'm truly thinking and feeling, and then being like, what is that? Like, where is that coming from? And do I still stand behind that? Is that the thing that I want to think or believe? A good example of that is that I was in New York City a month and a half ago. I was there over the New York City Marathon weekend, and I was there with my mom, and so we went and we watched some of the race, and the athletes that are in wheelchairs have the first stretch. Like, they start before the athletes who are runners. That caught me off guard, and I realized, I was like, I think I just assumed that someone in a wheelchair would be slower than someone who is running on their feet. And that was like a pause for me to be like, why is that my natural assumption? Like, that is coming from a place of bias. That is coming from this assumption that walking on your feet versus rolling in a wheelchair is an advantage, or that you can move faster. And so it was really this moment for me of being like, oh, I had this assumption that really is coming from an ableist standpoint in assuming that a non-disability in this case would be more advantageous than a disability, and then recognizing like where that was coming from, kind of checking it, feeling like slightly embarrassed by that. But the reason I'm embarrassed about it is I'm like, this is my work, this is what I'm supposed to do, I'm not supposed to have bias. And then it's like, no, that's not true. Like, I'm a human who has grown up in a world where non-disabled humans have received priority over disabled humans, and where there is a lot of ableist thinking that's just woven into our culture. Our world was built for non-disabled humans, and so recognizing like it makes sense that I would still have bias and that I still need to address that, and then being willing to actually do that, to admit it, to talk about it, to not just like hold on to that secret shame, but to actually like voice that, learn from it. Maybe other people can learn with me from that, and then move forward. So that's an example from my own life in, just the very recent past. And then the second thing and the last thing is that I encourage you, when you're stepping into a new area of diversity education, that you really do prioritize learning for yourself first before you try to dramatically expand or change your own networks. I know that this is something that I have experienced in terms of racial equity, this recognition of like, well, am I listening to black and brown voices the same way that I'm listening to white voices? Am I spending time with black and brown friends the way that I would with white friends? Like, who's in my sphere? Who am I listening to? Who am I spending time with? And recognizing like, nope, there's a big disparity there. It can be tempting to then, this is where it's a box to check, right? Like, I'm feeling guilty about that, so I want to change. This is me and my own white fragility here, trying to jump into a setting where I feel like I can say, I have lots of black and brown friends. I have lots of, I'm really well versed in music and culture and art, and the list goes on, and not taking time to do the learning or the understanding or the self-evaluation first. I then become an unsafe person who's put myself in an environment with myself at the forefront and thinking about myself and what I'm feeling guilty and what I want to change, and not actually thinking about the people around me. And I think that was really hard for me to sit with, that I need to become a safe person first. Before I try to make friends, I should never try to make friends to feel better about myself. But if it's truly something that I want to do, is to expand my own networks, social, work, environment, etc., and see a lot more diversity in all areas, then I need to do the work of identifying and working on my own bias and my own shit before I try to do that, so that I can be a good friend, so that I can be a good boss, so that I can be a good teammate, can be a good member of my city and my community. Like, that's important. Again, doing that internal work before I try to go external, because otherwise I've just really made myself someone else's problem. That is not the goal, and that does not promote unity. It does not promote connectedness. It doesn't promote change. So be willing to sit with your own bias. Don't place shame on your head in the process. You're human. We have built our world in ways that internalize from a very early age a lot of bias and a lot of discrimination. So picking that apart takes time, but it's worth doing the work, and it's worth doing the work first before you try to go out and really diversify your circles. So that's it. Happy 2024, you guys. It's really light stuff we're diving into the year here with, but good stuff. We're so excited. We're excited to see our little business grow this year. We're so thankful for you being part of that and being part of that growth. It is really starting to get dark now. So I'm going to sign off, but we're thankful for you, and we will see you next time.